I have an urgent message for XRP holders and anyone else who really holds crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or other major market cap cryptos. And I would argue that this message is even more important for anyone that holds altcoins that are not at least in the top 10 by market cap. Now, for those of you guys who are newer, anything that is in the top 10 by market cap, you can check by going to coinmarketcap.com, and it would be the number 10 and anything above, which is currently Cardano. And as you can see, the market cap on Cardano is only $18.7 billion. That sounds like a lot of money, but we recently experienced on October 10th just how illiquid some of these markets are, and they dumped more than 50% in a single day. Not with billions of dollars, although the market cap dumped that much. It only required millions of dollars for some of these to really dump hard, which means they are illiquid. And so this message is going to matter so much more if you are in other altcoins, because just today, Others, which is an index that tracks everything in crypto that is not in the top 10 by market cap relative to Bitcoin, going all the way back to January of 2022, is currently down 76.2%. In other words, holding anything other than Bitcoin or the top 10 cryptos by market cap has absolutely slaughtered you over the last 3 years, moving into now 4, which means we are no longer in the same crypto market. Things have fundamentally changed. And now that the bottom is falling out of the crypto market, most altcoins are going to bleed even more. So in this video, I'm going to keep it short, keep it sweet, get to the point, and show you what I am seeing in the crypto market and how you can prep moving forward, because right now we are in a very volatile, a very scary time, and most of the people watching this video are XRP holders, so I'm obviously going to be covering that. So the first thing I want to cover is actually some prior news that we've covered in the past, but more importantly, this correlation coefficient, which essentially tracks the correlation of the S&P 500 versus that of Bitcoin over 20 periods. In this case, I am on a weekly time frame. So this is a very long period of time. And as you can see here, whenever we get closer to the upper portion of this range, or the 1, we are essentially almost 100% correlated to the moves of the S&P 500. Now, I am looking at Bitcoin because, again, Bitcoin is essentially mothership of all of crypto. But more importantly, whatever Bitcoin is doing, the rest of the crypto market typically will follow. And if Bitcoin is dumping hard, the majority of other cryptos and altcoins are dumping even harder. And we just verified that by looking at others relative to Bitcoin. So that said, you can see so often, right? We trade up here for quite some time. In the case of March of 2020, all the way through April of 2021, the entire stock market was up, and Bitcoin was also up in that same period of time, highly correlated. Then what occurs is in April of 2021, all the way into this low of July of 2021, they were no longer correlated, which means maybe one was dumping harder than the other, one was typically pumping a little while the other is dumping. But generally speaking, you'll get this dump and a quick rally or a move back to the upside where they remain correlated. In other words, the stock market and crypto are currently treated as risk on assets. In similar fashion here, November of 2024 all the way until present, October of 2025, you can see that the S&P 500 is probably not dumping that much. However, crypto is, and so they are losing correlation. Crypto is essentially leading the stock market, although both are traded very similarly. This is a long period of time for something to be so highly correlated, which leads me to believe a lot of fund managers look at anything that is more volatile than, let's say, your safe haven assets, even though that's what Bitcoin is designed to do, are still willing to dump it in times of uncertainty. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. Now, moving back into this post from Peter Brandt, we did experience that broadening top. He did mention back here on October 21st how 114,800 was the sell zone, and almost to a T. We sold off there around $115,000, broke back down to about 105, and now below this broadening top top range, which is a very sketchy place to be, considering when you look at soybeans or any contracts over a long period of time throughout history, chart patterns seem to be the play. You can see that right here, this remained the sell level, and then things dumped for quite some time. And it may be the case now for all of crypto, Bitcoin, and XRP. Now, a few videos back, I did cover how Peter Brandt also shared another chart talking about the NASDAQ or the QQQ pumping and rallying for new all-time highs, essentially gapping up day after day, asking, what is this? And in my opinion, it is an exhaustion gap now that we've seen the retrace. Someone else stated, yes, it looks extremely similar to an exhaustion gap after a prolonged uptrend, and then pointed to the RSI, which we will cover on the Bitcoin chart as well. But that said, the reason we cover the NASDAQ is because the crypto market, more often than not, is also a leading indicator. In other words, it trades well before the stock market on a move because it is a 24/7 market. So for those who trade stocks or bigger institutional players who know what is likely going to happen next to the stock market, they trade the crypto market in that same direction because the majority of fund managers and institutions treat both of these asset classes as risk on asset classes. In other words, in an environment that is very shaky, uncertain, where we have a government shutdown that is prolonged and arguably one of the longest in history, all of that uncertainty alongside the rate cuts, which typically would be bullish, are indicative of a weakening economy. Then just the other day, I also covered how now there is more regional risk at regional banks, which means that a lot of people and players do not want to hold assets that are volatile in market environments such as this, which actually explains this correlation indicator. And if the stock market and crypto are currently correlated, there was a major deviation away from each other where the stock market continued to rally while Bitcoin and cryptos were dumping, essentially telling us what is going to happen next. And now Bitcoin is down to a new local low, so is XRP and the rest of the crypto market. Not only did we see this major gap up for an exhaustion gap, but we are starting to see the result of such a move as we are now gapping right back down and closing these gaps on QQQ. And it's likely that the top is in, which is essentially what the crypto market is telling us. Now, if you were watching or paying attention to any of my other videos, and I don't want to make this an extremely long one, I've talked about how over and over and over again, our range support was anywhere between 108 to like 105,000 on the low end. 107 was the average because back in December of 2024, we saw not only resistance once and twice, but also 3 times in May of this year. Then finally we rallied and broke for some new all-time highs, and our actual all-time high that we failed to close above on a weekly time frame was around $123,000, hitting it once, twice, and 3 times before selling off back down to the bottom of the range. You can see that we stuck and hung out in this range for a period of 3 separate weeks, failing to rally back to the upper side. That said, it seems Peter Brandt's prediction was pretty right. The fact that anything at $115,000 was the sell zone according to this broadening top type pattern. And what's even more interesting is that when you look at the 1977 soybean contract broadening top, it declined 50% in value from that high. And if that were to occur to Bitcoin at $100,000, we're looking at a price of $50,000 per Bitcoin. In other words, it's very much possible that the top is in for this year, something that I actually covered for our Altcoin Pro members earlier this week and consistently through the last week, that we would need to hold this support, and if we do not, get ready to sell. This is a video that I posted yesterday for our group before the breakdown, and many of them played this very well and have saved themselves a boatload of risk on the breakdown for many of their altcoins, not only Bitcoin, but many of them on XRP were selling from anywhere between 237 down to 227. Just on the day we broke back down to $2.07. And again, this isn't something that I'm like, hey, let's all go and short the market. The reality is no one of us is big enough to move the market. It's kind of like the ocean. The ocean has its tides and we simply have to swim with them. We can't swim against them, otherwise we will get wrecked. Now, Bitcoin being in a downtrend and putting in a new lower low for the very first time, hitting $98,000, which is lower than even that major liquidation event on October 10th, leads me to believe that the top was likely in at 126,000. We still have one last thing we need to see to verify that this is a bear market, but this would be a very weak bull market that we've recently experienced. So looking at the chart on XRP, you can see, I'll even go ahead and remove those drawings, that if we zoom back out to a daily time frame, and this is something I've been cautioning even the people on the channel about, is the fact that we've had a series of lower highs since that all-time high back in July. Lower high, lower high, lower high, with a series of consistent lows at about $2.75. When we broke down for a 50% move to the downside on October 10th, we broke below the range and failed to get back above the range, just barely touching it and peaking there on October 27th. So that said, we are officially below our range support, which is now going to act as a lot of overhead resistance, and it's going to be very difficult for XRP to break back above while Bitcoin is currently down and also in a downtrend. Right now, Bitcoin is going to carry the entire ship, and if the stock market's going down according to that correlation, then Bitcoin is likely going to go down and XRP will follow, showing relative weakness. Even off the highs right over here, for example, on October 3rd, where XRP put in its final high before breaking down, you can see that Bitcoin in that same period of down is down 17%, while XRP is down 28% right here at the bottom we're currently witnessing, which essentially means that XRP is relatively weak because it is a smaller market. And so it's going to likely break down even harder if Bitcoin breaks down, let's say, to $60,000, $70,000. And I don't think that's going to happen overnight. This is probably going to be over the course of the upcoming months if we fail to hit one indicator, which I'll cover here at the end of the video, because we're going to keep it short. And so the only way I can see a situation in which XRP could even possibly get back above 270, which would put us in a healthier zone in terms of the price action and lead me to believe that there's underlying demand and strength, is back above 273 to 275. The problem is I don't see any other catalyst in the near term except for that spot ETF. But let's say Bitcoin continues to dump, even a spot ETF entering the market. We'd have to see so much demand and people being bullish about it. And I'm not saying people aren't bullish for XRP. It's simply the fact that there might not be enough demand to push the price back above 270 while Bitcoin trades down. So we might see a negative correlation on a day or two. Let's say the spot ETF launches, XRP price pumps a little while Bitcoin's price dumps a little. At the end of the day, is it enough to pump the price from 217 all the way back up above 270? We saw the case and the results of the lawsuit where it didn't pump that much. It only pumped on the day right here, March, the end of the lawsuit. Heck, even the Trump pump failed to move it above for a new all-time high, occurring right here on March 2nd, where he said he's going to add XRP to a strategic national reserve. And this was still what? A downtrend, which leads me to believe that even a spot ETF here would not be enough. It would have had to happen at some point in time where the price was actually still above 270 for it to actually push the price potentially into new all-time highs. But that said, the odds of this asset hitting a high above 366 by the end of this year have waned to very low odds. I'm not saying it's not possible. Anything is possible in markets. It's just I would bet against it at this point in time. And if it were to happen, it might happen sometime next year, maybe closer to the end of the year, or if Bitcoin starts to look healthier again. Currently sitting at about $101,000, we're experiencing a lot of volatility. But this is a textbook downtrend, and now it looks like XRP just hit the range lows yet again, where we've seen quite a bit of support and a lot of wicks at about $2.10. So a break below here will likely take us back down to 190, which is our next major range support, where we have a lot of wicks and price action touching through the range. And a break below there is really going to send this price flying all the way back down to at least 125 to 137. I don't think that's going to happen overnight, but listen, we've seen a lot of things happen in a single day. In a bullish environment, this thing dumped 50%. So who says it can't happen again? Which means I'm preparing for that risk by not adding. I'm not adding to dips here because at the end of the day, this is a downtrend. It's weak. If anything, I'd be selling into a retrace, and that's not because I don't like XRP, it's because I'm trying to be on the right side of the market. My goal in markets is to make money. It's not to be so dogmatic about any one thing or such a firm believer in any one asset that I can't control that I get wrecked every single which way in a bear market. My goal in markets is simply to make money. And when I keep that first and foremost in front of my mind, guess what? It becomes a priority, and I more often than not make money, or at least don't lose money, while the majority of players are losing money. So that said, I am not adding to risk here. And in any situation now where I see that we're in a downtrend into a retrace, I'd be more likely to want to short. So that said, yes, Bitcoin is officially printing a new downtrend back below range support, and the only way in which we'll officially know if we are in a bear market or not is arguably in a week or two. When I pull up that 40-week moving average, you can see that multiple times in the earlier phases of this uptrend and bull market, which we've been in for quite some time, starting all the way back in January of 2023 when the bottom was in, we've been supported at that 40-week simple moving average, except for one time right here where we had a bear trap. We broke below and closed below the 40-week moving average before breaking right back into the range and then being supported at it once and twice and then breaking for new all-time highs. That said, we did have a long, strong wick that was bought right back up. This is either possible and potential here, or this is. And so let's say we break below because this thing is starting to flatten out, which means the trend is flattening out. And then the next week we break right back above. I'd still like to see the price above $108,000 to be bullish. I am not going to be buying a retrace back up to 108 because I believe that officially this is a new overhead resistance that's going to be very difficult for the crypto market to break in an environment where we are uncertain and the NASDAQ look like it's topped and we are cutting rates to deal with the worsening economy. Okay, but let's say we are supported here and we do get back above $108,000 this week or next week on a weekly close. This next week, we still have 4 days and 22 hours until this candle closes. It's possible we close right back above this white line. It's possible that the week after we pump right back into $108,000 to $109,000. And that week, I will watch it very closely. But if we remain here and close here, that is extremely dangerous for the entire crypto market, which could lead us into a prolonged end to the year bear market into April, May, when it's like sell in May and look away. This is a very weak October. It's been a very poor start to November in an environment where it's typically extremely bullish. So this is kind of like the end, in my opinion, of the typical 4-year cycle. Things are never going to be the same anymore, and that's because we have institutions playing in crypto in a way they've never been involved before. That said, they're still going to be accumulating, and if I were an institution, I'd like to short the crap out of this thing to get it to the point where let's say it hits like $69,000 to $60,000 back down here, so I can buy and add to a spot position all the way through this next year, because I believe it's going to go up to, let's say, new all-time highs, $250,000, $500,000. And if that were to happen for something like Bitcoin, XRP has a lot of room to dump right here, and I would say at least to $1.22 to $1. And so again, those would be great accumulation zones for institutional players because they can still make money on the downside. They can short this thing, and as the price goes down, guess what? They make money. And it's also important to note here, XRP was supported at that 40-week moving average going back to June this year before pumping for an all-time high, and has now struggled to get back above, and the trend has officially turned over where we are seeing resistance. So if anything, this is a very dangerous place to be buying dips, and I wouldn't be adding to that risk. And that is it for the video, folks. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check out altcoinpro.com. I don't want to make a long drawn out pitch. I do all the time, but the value of this truly is worth more than anything you'd ever pay to be here. Matter of fact, you would have saved yourself far more than $97 if you would have been in tune with the markets because of a simple post or a call that I made just yesterday. I made this post 24 hours ago before the markets really started dumping on what to do and how to play this entire market range. And guess what? It saved people a lot of money. And today on the call, they have been thanking me. And I host a call every single week called Technical Analysis Tuesday. Many of our students ask questions about problems they're currently struggling with, how to look at a chart, how to know what comes next. And guess what? It's not like I predicted it. At the end of the day, I saw the chart was telling me a story. I believed the story the chart was telling me, not the story I hear online all the time through all these talking heads. And I made the right decision, which has saved me money and actually made me money because I actually added to short positions. And so if you want access to that or anything else, like one of these lessons from our Altcoin Pro library, which is almost complete now and has everything you'd ever need to become a crypto millionaire or succeed and hit all of your goals, then head on over to altcoinpro.com. Now, obviously, I can't guarantee you're going to be a millionaire. However, what I can guarantee is you're going to be 110% satisfied with the value here, or you can ask for a refund in 14 days and get your money back. Thanks so much for watching this video, my friend, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.